Week 15 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few kickers I would start this week. The first kicker, Jake Moody of the San Francisco 49ers. It's been an up and down year for Moody, no doubt about it. Injuries and inconsistencies kicking the football, but he's still on a high-powered offense. I know, obviously, Christian McCaffrey hurt again. Brandon Ayuk, he's been out a while now and out for the season. But Jake Moody, I believe, could go out there and help fantasy owners in this week in a potential high-scoring game on Thursday night versus the Rams. I think fantasy points will be there. So the last few games, Week 12 at Green Bay 5, Week 13 at Buffalo 3, and Week 14 versus the Bears 8 fantasy points. So this week would have most likely a high-scoring game, where Thursday night these games are usually high-scoring, and the Rams the last couple of weeks have been in high-scoring battles. I think Moody goes out there and he helps fantasy owners this week. The next kicker, Cameron Dicker of the Los Angeles Chargers. Dicker, one of the best kickers in all the NFL this season, and he definitely had an off game, but he was due to have an off game. After 3 games in a row, we had double-digit fantasy points. So Week 12 versus Baltimore, 16. Week 13 at Atlanta, 12. Week 14 at Kansas City, 5 fantasy points. So this week with a great matchup versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where their defense really can't stop anyone this season. I think Dicker is going to get opportunities. And this Los Angeles Charger offense, they've stalled out a lot over the last few weeks here, where they are not scoring touchdowns and they have to settle for field goals, and especially some long field goals. We've seen Dicker hit a few 50-plus yarders over the week. So this week in a decent matchup and a game where they got to put points on the board versus a good offense in Tampa Bay, I like Dicker as a start this week. The next start, Tyler Bass of the Buffalo Bills. So Tyler Bass on a high-powered offense. Last week, what a matchup it was, and a tough loss, 44-42 at the Los Angeles Rams, where he only had 6 extra points in that ball game was Tyler Bass. But when you're on a high-powered offense, opportunities to come knocking. And this week, another matchup where I believe it's going to be a high-scoring game at the Lions that give up the 20th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. Week 11 versus Kansas City 4, Week 13 versus San Francisco 4, and Week 14 at the Rams 6. I know the numbers haven't been great over the last few weeks, but I just believe an indoor game and another high-scoring game. Bass might trot out there for a couple deep ones. And this week, he's a kicker I have as a start. Next kicker, staying in the same game, Jake Bates of the Detroit Lions. So Bates, he's got a boot, no doubt about it. Lions, in my opinion, the best offense and most high-powered offense in all pro football. Last 4 out of 5 games, he's had double-digit fantasy points as Bates. Week 12 at Indianapolis, 8. Week 13 versus the Bears, 11. Week 14 versus Green Bay, 11. And this week in a matchup versus the Bills, where their defense most weeks is a bend-but-don't-break unit, I think opportunities to be there for Bates. And when your kicker's in a high-powered offense, you got to expect anywhere from 8 to 10 fantasy points. And he's obviously gone over that many times with a lot of double-digit fantasy games, especially the last month and change. So Jake Bates, definitely a kicker I would start this week. In the 5th and final kicker, I would start Amy Fairbairn of the Houston Texans. So coming off a bye week, good matchup versus the Dolphins coming to town. Indoor game, obviously, over there in Houston. And this is going to be a high-scoring game as well, I believe, between these two teams. So the Dolphins give up the 5th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. So Fairbairn, we know he's got unlimited range anywhere from that 55 to 60-yard range. He could kick it as Fairbairn. He's on a high-powered offense with great weapons. Joe Mixon, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, C.J. Stroud, even taking a step back this season, is C.J. Stroud. But Ka'im Fairbairn, like I said, they're going to be in a high-scoring game with Miami. He's got big distance, and indoor games are always a plus where you don't have to deal with the outside element. So this week, with everything lined up to be well for Fairbairn, once again, he's a must-start kicker this week. So that's a few kickers I look to start for Week 15 of the fantasy football season.